Attention chicks and dicks of the USS Sephora. As of right this second, Rhino 2-1 and Rhino 2-3 are fighting to get a hold of the situation we're in. We don't leave Marines behind.
Hi, I'm Tim Travis of Xbox Reviews and Verdicts, and today I'm reviewing Aliens Colonial Marines from Sega and Gearbox. Let's face it, there are a ton of recognizable 80s action movies, but arguably the best of that era was a sequel to 1979's Alien, a horror film and an unquestionable sci-fi masterpiece. The sequel, Aliens, upped the ante of the original in a film that was the perfect blend of all-out action and suspense. Not only was it a superb sequel, but its attitude, aesthetic, and balls-to-the-wall action was ripe for video game adaptation. After all, that film has influenced over 20 years of this interactive medium. But a truly great Aliens game never really came. Now, after 6 years of speculation and waiting, a canonical sequel to the Alien trilogy, Aliens Colonial Marines, is finally upon us. But what's the verdict? Let's find out. Colonial Marines is in the genre of games it should be. It's a first-person shooter where you play as Corporal Winter, a no-nonsense soldier sent with a detachment of Colonial Marines responding to a distress call from Dwayne Hicks, a major character from Aliens. From then on, it's a lot of shooting Xenos. Aliens was ripe with interesting monsters and awesome weapons to shoot them with, so Colonial Marines being an FPS is no surprise at all. The game almost has a 90s corridor shooter feel since the game has degrading armor and semi-regenerating health, but armor and health packs are so abundant that it's rarely an issue. This is kind of neat since the film inspired the shooter aesthetic during the formation of the genre. The selection of guns might not be as diverse as those in other modern shooters, but it gets the job done. The pulse rifle feels and sounds like it should, shotguns rip enemies apart at close range, the smart gun is aptly named as it auto-locks onto targets, and much of the arsenal has a look that's in line with the pulse rifle and feature powerful alternate fires. A key part of your kit is the iconic motion tracker. The sound effects are there and it is useful, but since you can't use it simultaneously with a weapon, it ends up being more useful as a multiplayer cooperative tool, assuming you have a friend who can communicate with you. The shooting gets the job done, and the weapon customization during the campaign is a nice feature, but the gameplay is the first of many issues Colonial Marines faces. Almost half of the game is spent fighting Weyland-Yutani mercenaries, which makes sense in the context of the story and universe, but these encounters are downright uninspired. Your weaponry is generally pretty shallow. Shotguns can get the job done but feel somewhat crummy. The semi-automatic battle rifle is only really useful against human enemies, and an underbarreled flamethrower sounds awesome, but it can only be mounted under a burst fire assault rifle that isn't much fun to use. Basically, anything that's not an automatic seems ill-conceived, except for the smart gun, which is unexciting despite the fact that it can rip aliens to shreds. It's not helped that melee combat is just barely functional, and there was no need to have a full arsenal with you at all times. The gameplay also isn't true to the films in that xenomorphs can be absolute pushovers. They were relentless and terrifying in the films. Here, there's barely any sense of danger or terror. You only on occasion encounter more than 3 at a time, when their strength should be in numbers or catching you off guard. However, sometimes those off-guard moments are during context-sensitive actions, which results in cheap deaths. Facehuggers are embarrassing. In the movie, just one of these parasites required an entire team of Marines to subdue. Here you tap the X button repeatedly, then they give up. I'm not joking. And quite frankly, the bosses are terrible. The AI is simply not good. It's at its worst in 3-way skirmishes between the player, Xenos, and mercenaries, and the friendly AI has its quirks as well. Sometimes allies won't catch up to your location fast enough, so the developers will have them spawn on your location. It's absolutely lazy. The movie told the tale of a hopeless struggle for survival. A team of well-armed Marines were outmatched by a technologically inferior foe. The developers are far from talented enough to give the player that feeling, and the gameplay overall can get repetitive. And despite this game being inspired by such a memorable action movie, this game is barely cinematic at all. Possibly a bigger issue than the rote gameplay are the graphics. This game looks dated at best. Textures are extremely low res, the explosive effects are piss poor, the many outdoor areas of LV-426 look dreadful, and the frame rate will sometimes stutter even when there's nothing going on. Animations can be horrendous at times, and the lip syncing is shoddy at best. One embarrassing moment occurs during a half-baked stealth section, which showcases some of the most unintentionally comical animation in recent memory. Throw in numerous glitches and technical issues, and you have a game that's simply unfinished. It wouldn't have even looked state of the art at the time of its announcement 5 years ago. This is a game that is hard to look at and inexcusable in an age where developers still get a lot of mileage out of the 360's 7-year-old hardware. And no, things don't get any better in the cutscenes. This game is so ugly that it undermines the signature look of the franchise. Multiplayer in theory has the potential to overcome some of the campaign's issues. There is fun to be had here, and the amount of character customization for both the Marines and Xenomorphs is actually quite solid, but the multiplayer does have its set of issues. It's asymmetric gameplay. One side plays as Marines, with gameplay familiar to the campaign, but the other side plays as the aliens. Playing as the aliens controls like a dual-stick third-person shooter, but instead of using weapons, you have melee attacks, the ability to see enemies through walls, and if you play as a spitter, you have a somewhat effective but unimpressive ranged attack. You can crawl on walls, which works in most circumstances, but when you get somewhere the game doesn't allow you to climb, things can get mildly frustrating and look awkward. But the only necessary strategy for playing as the aliens is sneaking around the Marines and attacking from behind, which doesn't usually require climbing around. It's too bad the melee combat doesn't compare to a good action game. There are 4 modes in multiplayer. Team Deathmatch and Extermination are the more standard modes that have 5 playable maps, whereas the modes more suited for the asymmetrical play, Survivor and Escape, have only 2 maps each. Escape can be easily likened to Left 4 Dead, where Marines have to accomplish objectives and Xenos have to stop them. Survivor has Marines held up in a defendable building and, you guessed it, have to survive a player-driven Xeno assault. Multiplayer is in a weird predicament where the more unique modes, Survivor and Escape, should be the most fun, but with the Marines having the advantage of superior firepower and the Xenos' disadvantage of longer respawns, it's not much fun being the supposedly savage aliens. But because of those long respawns, Marines don't have much to shoot at. I could see the fun of these modes multiplying if you have a well-coordinated group of friends, but you'd still be playing a game with middle-of-the-road mechanics and crappy visuals. Team Deathmatch, on the other hand, is what the other modes should be, despite the fact that it doesn't take advantage of the asymmetrical playstyles. The mode is faster paced and at least somewhat exciting. The campaign can be played in 4-player co-op, but it doesn't at all improve the experience. The environments are too cramped for the amount of players, the mode makes the difficulty trivial, and shows even more of the game's technical flaws. You'd think at this point, this story could be Aliens Colonial Marines' saving grace, but whereas the gameplay and technical issues need more polish, a lot more polish, the story just needed to be completely rethought. It starts with the empty characters who are a shell of those in the films. It's not helped that story elements or minor details don't feel true to the film. How can chest bursters rip straight through armor? And why in the world would it be revealed that a major character had been impregnated by a facehugger 30 minutes into the game, ruining any sense of mystery? It gets worse. The story actively chooses not to explain and fill plot holes. Why is a Sulaco aboard LV-426 again and infested by a xenomorph hive? Well, that can't be explained because the guy with the ship's flight recorder is shot into the vacuum of space. Late in the game, things just become embarrassing. In order to bring back a character who supposedly died in the films, this character, whose identity I won't reveal due to getting into heavy spoiler territory, literally explains his appearance by saying, "That's a much longer story." It's contrived to say the very least. And I can't believe I'm saying this, but I wish this character who I enjoyed in the film just stayed dead. Sure, the game has fan service, but it only reminds you of a canon that has been damaged by this game's forced storytelling.
I'm gonna throw up.
Aliens Colonial Marines is in no way the new low standard of license games, but not only should this have been one of the best license games around, given the franchise's long history and influence on gaming, it could have rebooted the franchise in its own way. There is fun to be had here, but this mediocre shooter feels hastily put together and is inexcusable to fans. Game over, man. Game over. Thanks for watching this review. Please subscribe to the channel, and I hope you enjoy my future videos.